Thank you very much. Welcome to the Cowdrey Lecture. We're very honoured to have you, Archbishop, here, the chance to hear you speak on the subject of the spirit of cricket. You've already transformed this room from an indoor cricket school to a lecture room to accommodate the number of people who wanted to come and hear you. 800 people applied for tickets within 24 hours. No doubt you will put the issues of fairness, respect, and the spirit of this activity, cricket, into a broader context than we cricketers often do. As the remarkable Trinidadian writer C.L.R. James said, "What do they know of cricket who only cricket know?" Like so many people round the world, we have admired greatly the spirit of your lifelong activities on behalf of human respect and fair play. Not only did you courageously oppose apartheid, calling upon the international community to impose economic sanctions against South Africa while you were the General Secretary of the South African Council of Churches, you also chaired, more recently, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, a remarkable experiment in attempting to achieve some reconciliation after times of systematic injustice. This was a process in which the aim of truthfulness about often appalling crimes was put above the aim of justice and punishment. I imagine for the person being investigated, such a process having to acknowledge in full detail and in public, in front of people he'd hurt or the families of those he'd killed, some of the activities that most shame him, must have been as much of an ordeal as a trial and imprisonment. In this country, the Tutu Foundation continues his work, your work, in communities in conflict. And if you're interested, you'll find leaflets at the back. We will hear how Archbishop Tutu's passion for cricket was awakened when, as a teenager in hospital, he used to listen on the radio to John Arlott. John used to tell a story about his own visit to South Africa, when he went there in order to report on the 1947 MCC tour. When he left the country, he had to fill in a departure form. There was a space on the departure form on which you were supposed to enter your race. John left this space empty. The officer asked him why. He growled, "I'm a member of the human race." Our speaker calls himself an armchair cricket enthusiast, but he's very serious about following the game whenever he has the opportunity, sending congratulatory messages to the South African players. He's often been a VIP guest at Newlands Cricket Ground, and he fondly remembers his first visit to Lord's while serving as a curate at Bletchingley near Redhill in Surrey. Before I hand over to our speaker, I should also announce that after he's finished speaking, there'll be a panel with Mark Nicholas chairing the event, and he'll be joined by Andrew Strauss, as you know, England's player of the series against New Zealand, and Barry Richards, one of the great opening batsmen, himself a former Cowdrey lecturer. Oh, and myself. We are very grateful to all three of you for coming and being willing to take part in this way. And if the Archbishop feels like entering the fray again, he'll be most welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to welcome Archbishop Desmond Tutu.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President, for your very kind words of welcome and introduction. Mr. Chairperson, ladies and gentlemen, cricket lovers all. I sent a copy of my intended address, and can you believe it? They said, no, it's too short. Now, can you imagine a preacher missing out on this opportunity? I mean, standing in front of a rostrum and with a captive audience. Well, you are in trouble. So I will have had a few additions to fill out my original address, but thank you so very much for the honor you have done me by inviting me to give this year's Spirit of Cricket Cowdrey lecture. And thank you to the family for not opposing it, I don't think. I hope not. I am something of a snob, nonchalantly dropping names. The other day when I was in the Oval Office, I don't know whether you remember the story of someone who was quite an inveterate name dropper, and one day his friend got a little knocked and said, "John, why are you so fond of name dropping?" And John replies, "Oh, that's strange. Yesterday when I was in Buckingham Palace, the Queen asked me the same question." I'm very greatly privileged to be here. 45 years after I first came to Lord's with Martin Kenyon, the English friend who introduced our family to so much of British life. I remember when I first came in 1962 to England, he took me to his club, the Travellers, and I hadn't eaten this kind of game fowl where you had to keep spitting shotgun pellets out. But I do have a confession. I was ever so slightly miffed to see your lecturer described in some reports as the first Cowdrey lecturer to be drawn from outside the circle of international cricket. And as the President has already indicated, you can put this down to the influence of the BBC's John Allott on a 15-year-old schoolboy in 1947. I was living in the community of Sophiatown to the west of Johannesburg, where Father Trevor Huddleston and his celebrated brother monks from Yorkshire ministered when I was diagnosed with tuberculosis. The fathers found me a hospital bed at Rietfontein, a hospital on the eastern outskirts of Johannesburg, to which I was confined for 21 months. It was a long way from my home. Public transport was not very good, and my family couldn't visit me very often. But a fellow patient, a teacher, introduced me to the cricket commentary on the radio for the first time. So John Allott, with his distinctive voice and inimitable word pictures, drew me into the circle of international cricket 60 years ago. As a fan, I feel doubly privileged to have been asked to give a lecture named for Colin Cowdrey. When Martin Kenyon first brought me to sit in the Warner stand, it was for the fourth day's play of the second test of the West Indies 1963 tour. At the time, I was a theology student at King's College in the Strand, and that day, I believe I was actually supposed to have gone to see the dean of the college about my finances. something over which I was constantly getting into trouble. I can't claim to have remembered this. My memory is awful. But someone who was researching my life a few years ago found that I was at Lord's on the day that West Hall, he who used to strike fear into the hearts of batsmen everywhere, when bowling in tandem with, I think, Charlie Griffiths, broke Colin Cowdrey's left arm with one of his fast balls. Colin Cowdrey retired hurt, but became the staff of legend when later in the day he returned to the wicket, prepared if necessary to bat despite having a broken arm. Perhaps I didn't remember this because he didn't broadcast it. I think it would have been in keeping with who he was. But it seems that unwittingly I experienced that day the sight of Colin Cowdrey epitomizing the spirit of cricket. In that series, here's another confession. I have to admit that I supported the West Indies against England. And what a year it was, in which black cricketers and the fans who had preceded them here showed you somewhat stiff upper lip Englishmen and women how much fun it is to celebrate cricket and to celebrate it exuberantly. I recall sitting and seeing maybe Tech Dexter execute an exquisite cover drive. And the gentlemen around, well played, well played, well played, rather sedately. Not quite the kind of thing now that you, when Panessa or somebody does something extraordinary in the field, the outbursts are fantastic. I suppose there must be some who are turning in their graves thinking about the extraordinary change that has come over the face of cricket. But in 1966, I changed my allegiance to England, and that was when Basil d'Oliveira, denied the chance to represent our country because of the color of his skin, was first selected for England. Basil had originally been brought here by John Allott to replace Wes Hall in the Central Lancashire League club Middleton before going on to play for Worcestershire. How we thrilled to see our compatriots stride out also here at Lord's to play in the second test against the West Indies for the nation which had adopted him. For us South Africans, perhaps England's finest demonstration of the spirit of cricket in those years came ahead of the 1968-69 tour to South Africa. After initially shying at the hurdle, to borrow a metaphor from another sport, the selectors went ahead and named Basil d'Oliveira as a member of the touring team. In response, the unbending John Foster, the South African Prime Minister, who had been interned during World War II for his Nazi sympathies, presumed to know cricket better than you did by declaring that your team was not the MCC team, but the team of the anti-apartheid movement. The rest, as they usually say, is history. The tour was cancelled, as was the 1970 South African tour to England. In 1970, we were also expelled from the Olympics, and we spent 25 years in sporting isolation. May I pay a posthumous tribute to a dear friend, David Shepherd, who was quite amazing in fact being willing to turn down an offer of captaining the MCC because he didn't want to go and play in South Africa. And Peter Hain and all of those who followed him, those who were fantastic people in making it quite clear to the South Africans that they were going to be pariahs as long as they continued their vicious apartheid policy. Many of you will remember how effective the sports boycott of the 1970s and 80s was in conveying to sports crazy South Africans that our society had placed itself beyond the pale by continuing to organize its life on the basis of racial discrimination. Your refusal to kowtow to racism was a sanction that hurt the supporters of apartheid the most. And for those of us who suffered the effects of discrimination, nothing could have shown us more vividly the principal value enshrined in the preamble on the spirit of cricket, which Lord Cowdrey and Ted Dexter later helped introduce to the laws of the game. The value which is all the more powerful for the simplicity of its statement. That, of course, is fair play. For 20 years, as the sports boycott tightened and apartheid stopped generations of South African sportsmen and women, both white and black, from realizing their full potential, you and others like you drummed into us what the world saw as fair play and what it saw as unfair play. I have not the slightest doubt that what you did played a major role in persuading the supporters of apartheid to change this. And in the negotiations which followed, FW de Klerk's courageous decision to release Nelson Mandela in 1990, to agree on a constitution which was based on the principle also enshrined in the spirit of cricket, of respect for others. And it was again here at Lord's that we acknowledged your and our joint victory when our boys returned in 1994 to play yours in the first test in 1994. The first test between us in 29 years. True, the match did have some difficult moments. I seem to recall a captain with dirt in his pockets and an archbishop who was thought to be improperly dressed for the pavilion. But most importantly, we celebrated together. We celebrated in the spirit of cricket, even if we South Africans did so a little too exuberantly for the MCC's regulations. You might remember our players getting into trouble by insisting on waving our brand new South African flag, the one that represented our new identity as a rainbow nation, from their balcony. There have been those who have loved the dichotomies that try to divide life into watertight compartments: the religion, politics, sport, imagining fondly that these were watertight and impervious to one another. But we know differently. Politics impinges on sport as much as on any other aspect of life. We know what has happened recently with the Olympic torch and its relevance to China's policies, especially with regard to Tibet, and the Dalai Lama's pleas for autonomy for Tibet, for putting pressure on the rather unpleasant men running Myanmar, Burma, who carelessly have been quite unmoved as many Burmese devastated by the cyclone Nagis are languishing without aid when the international community has offered aid which the junta is opposing. seeking to pressure China to use its leverage with the Sudanese government, and having done so, persuading them to accept a larger peacekeeping force in Darfur. And unbelievably, China seeking to arm Mr. Mugabe, who is terrorizing his own people. And so you are going to have to be making decisions about whether to play cricket with that particular regime. The Chinese have not been unmindful of what their policies might mean, what repercussions they might have for the Beijing Olympics. And I certainly hope that world political leaders will heed our call that they boycott the opening ceremony, as your Prime Minister will be doing. We know that politics and sport have an important relationship. We indicated that the sports boycott played a crucial part in our liberation. And now, sport is playing a pivotal part in helping to build us up to be the rainbow nation. Monochrome national sporting teams are a thing of the past. Non-racial teams are catalytic, helping to speed up the process of nation building. Iconic as they show up what we can be. Isn't it fantastic? Well, certainly it is for us that a Makaya Ntini, our black fast bowler, the first South African to take 10 wickets in a test match here at Lord's, and so to have his name inscribed in your hallowed walls, that he, in a South Africa that is soccer mad and maybe rugby mad, that he, a cricketer, for 2 years in succession, has been voted by the public the most admired South African sportsman. That speaks volumes about changes in perspectives. It says a lot about a country which only a few years ago had a vicious policy that alienated race from race as a deliberate act of public policy, keeping the different races in separate ghettos. It says the achievements of people like Makaya Ntini say to the previously disadvantaged, the marginalized, hey man, reach for the stars. The sky is the limit. Race is a total irrelevance in determining the worth and ability of a person. And do you recall 1995 when we won the World Rugby Cup for the first time? The All Blacks were by far the better side on the day. But we desperately needed that victory. And someone up there was clearly betting for us. It was quite unbelievable what happened when the final whistle blew. People were dancing in celebration in the black townships for a victory by a largely white, almost exclusively Afrikaner team. That victory was worth more than umpteen sermons we could have sought to preach, more than the eloquent speeches of politicians. Sorry we had to beat the English to become world champs again. But I think you can console yourselves with the fact that we beat the current Six Nation champs last Saturday quite comprehensively. Cricket has illustrated a central concept, that is, when we work together, then are we most likely to succeed. The best batsman or bowler can't win on his own. He could bowl his heart out, but if he had lousy fielders, it would come to nothing. We are all at our best. Our societies flourish most when we cooperate in the spirit of what in our country we call Ubuntu, the essence of being human. That my humanity is caught up in your humanity. I wouldn't know how to walk as a human being. I wouldn't know how to speak as a human being. I wouldn't know how to think as a human being. I wouldn't know how to be human unless I learned it all from other human beings. I need other human beings in order for me to be human. And we say in our part of the world, in the spirit of Ubuntu, a person is a person through other persons. That we are made for interdependence. We are made for complementarity. For I have gifts that you don't have, and you have gifts that I don't have. And you could almost see God say, voila, rubbing God's hands and saying, that's precisely why I created you different. Different, not so that you should be separated. Different to know your need of one another. That we fantastically illustrated so splendidly by cricket. We are made for togetherness. We're made really for family. We're made as those who have to live in a delicate network of interdependence. And all kinds of things go horribly badly wrong when we break this fundamental law of our being. When we can spend obscene amounts on what we call defense budgets, really budgets of death and destruction, when we know that but a small fraction of those budgets would ensure that children everywhere had enough water to drink, had enough food to eat, could afford a decent home, could have an affordable health care. Children die today because they cannot afford fairly inexpensive, quite inexpensive inoculations. And so cricket reminds us, hey, we are made for togetherness. We're made as those who are going to have to turn this world and make it something that is more compassionate, more caring, more loving, more gentle. And you here, a part of God's team plan, collaborators to help God bring about a realization of God's dream. Could we have any higher aspiration, not only for cricket, but for the whole of life as we humans experience it in community, than to live our lives in the spirit of cricket? Thank you.
Some years ago, for Jim Swanton's 90th birthday, there was a small dinner held across the way in the pavilion. And following the likes of Sir Tim Rice, Lord Maclaurin, Lord Griffiths, was the Archbishop Runcie. And when it was his turn to speak, he got to his feet and he said, "Enough now of mere knights and lords, time for an archbishop." And I think that we had our time with an archbishop this evening, the time that we will never forget. Sir, you've not only provoked us and moved us, but you've richly entertained us. Thank you very much. You mentioned that Ted Dexter, who played that stroke and who was my hero as a boy, and Colin were the people who made the spirit of cricket what it is today, really, by their instinct, I think. It's hard sometimes to crystallize what it might mean in different parts of the world, but they seem to have a greater grasp of it then than perhaps anybody since. Many people have done their bit along the way, not least at these lectures, but all over the world. In fact, so much so that we've seen the campaign now embraced by the Indian Premier League. That was something that was sparked by Jeremy Cowdrey, taken up by Tim Wright and Keith Bradshaw and John Stevenson and then Lalit Modi. And the word is spreading. There are little cards that appear everywhere in harness with Chance to Shine. These play hard and play fair cards were all over India during the IPL. The MCC's now joined forces with Chance to Shine, with 200,000 primary school children aware of its existence and adopting it. Cranley School, again through Jeremy Cowdrey, hosted the inaugural MCC Spirit of Cricket Schools Evening in April. And all over the world, there are now junior competitions being run under the Spirit of Cricket banner. Members of the Cowdrey family are here, as has been alluded to. Chris, of course, who captained England, and Crystal and their two boys, Fabian and Julius, who have a bit of talent themselves, and put on 100 today together, batting for their house team, so that isn't bad. And also Graham and Maxine are here. Great to see Graham here. He had a little wobble prior to Christmas, but he's in good nick as well, so it's wonderful to have them here. Now, our guest, before I ramble on too far, he introduced himself, but I think it's entirely appropriate. The man who's our president this year was not only the most cerebral captain of England, but comfortably the best. Unfairly, people often said he was chosen to play for England because of his leadership skills. That's not true. He was chosen to play for England in 1976 as a batsman, and a damn good one. Mike Brearley. Mike had to play against Hampshire and South Africa, indeed, and come across the greatest of his time, the batsman who made batting look poetically simple and always very beautiful, a player who along with a namesake, dominated batting for a period that was, I think we may look back in another 100 years and talk about it, a golden age, and that might have been a part of that golden age. A man who has gone on to be a broadcaster of note, but who played a very important part in things that were happening in South Africa in the late 60s and the early 70s. The incomparable Barry Richards. And last, but absolutely by no means least, the man who should have taken England to Australia 18 months ago but didn't, the man who will go on to be the most important cricketer of his time. I suspect that's a big call, but my heaven, he's batting well at the moment. Andrew Strauss. Very nice to see you. Grab a seat there. We'll just lighten the mood an iota. Geoffrey Boycott tells me you've got a new game, that you're playing off the back foot, back and across, and that's the Strauss we'll see now, who won't score as quickly, but will make plenty of runs for England because you're in a nice comfort zone with your own play. Is any of this remotely true?
Not really, no. Actually, to be fair, I've had to go away and have a look at my game a little bit, and I think when you do that, you realise where your strengths and weaknesses are a little bit, and I think I've been able to maybe focus a little bit more on my strengths and eliminate the weaknesses to a certain extent. The sad thing is that I'm becoming slightly more Geoffrey Boycott-like in my batting. And in the age of 2020 cricket, I'm not sure that's a great career move, but
particularly now, yeah. Barry, you said when you watched Andrew and Michael Vaughan bat at Old Trafford, when they were putting together the partnership that won the game. I mean, I've watched a lot of cricket with you over the years, and you've frequently been reading the newspaper. But on this occasion, you watched every ball. You were quite captivated, not just by the success they had, but the way in which they achieved it.
Absolutely. I think what I liked most about it was the fact that they scored off a high percentage of deliveries. There wasn't the bash and bang. It was placement. It was good running between the wickets. It was intelligent cricket. And it really put New Zealand on the back foot, won the game for England. And it was, it was a pleasure to watch it. It was proper Test cricket, played at a very good pace.
Do you like what you see, Michael, with the England side now? I mean, I'm delighted that Michael Vaughan is back fully fit and leading it. I mean, I hesitate to say he's our finest leader since you, but he is.
Yes, to answer your question. I like what I see. Well, I mean, like everyone else in this room, I'll enjoy it more when Andrew Flintoff is fit and back. But I think it's the team seems to be coming together. There's a good spirit, obviously. They support each other. People seem to chip in when needed often enough. I mean, it might be a little more difficult against South Africa, but we'll look forward to that.
Does spirit in a team come through winning? Or is spirit something you can create in order to win?
Both. I mean, it becomes a habit. You have to learn to win. You have to learn to expect to win, and to then keep doing things that will make you more likely to win. But of course, you have to get to that point as well. So I'm sure spirit in a team comes in all sorts of complicated ways, from thought and from example and from connection between people. But it certainly is increased by winning as well.
Can an unhappy team win?
Very, very hard. They'd have to be super talented, because I think what Brez says is absolutely right. And I think that's where the captain's job is a very important one, because there's a lot of personalities involved. And you have to be able to gel those together. And that's what creates the spirit. If you can't, you're in big trouble.
We've got this extraordinary situation, and it's very difficult, actually, I have to say, for the chairman of the ECB. Giles Clarke is here, and there are going to be announcements tomorrow, I think, and he probably knows already a lot more than we are able to even begin to imagine about the announcements coming. But this is a tumultuous time for the game. We're all very aware of it. Some of us feel threatened by it because we fear for the future of Test match cricket, because we believe that those skills are the essential nature of cricket and that they may be lost in time with the simplicity of the short form. We therefore are worried about the extent of 2020's impact. This isn't a direct question about going to play in India or anything such thing, but is the player's instinct at the moment to follow every new opportunity, or can a player stand back and make judgments?
I mean, we've had a couple of preliminary chats amongst the boys about this. I think there are great opportunities there for cricketers. It's a great time to be playing cricket. There are great opportunities to make money. But I think more than anything, there are great opportunities for the development of the game to be secured. And I think that's what's very, very exciting about what's happening at the moment. There's going to be a lot of money coming into the game. And if it's used properly, that can ensure loads more people playing game at a younger level. And what the Archbishop was talking about earlier, that feeling of connection and team spirit, you can get loads more people playing a game that they wouldn't necessarily otherwise play. So it's an exciting time. You're right, Mark, there are great opportunities for us here representing England, but I think we're wrong to be too worried about the future of the Test game. I think everyone who has played Test cricket, who's been involved in Test cricket, realises its importance, and the 2020 can be a way almost of subsidising and making sure that the Test format of the game remains strong and secure.
Barry, you were, don't take this wrongly, but there's a strong case that says you were the first of the mercenary cricketers. You were paid rands for runs in South Africa, you went dollars for runs in Australia, and here there was something in county cricket then called talent money, and certain players were paid more the better they performed in what was often an unhappy system. Do you look at what you see now and see a potential utopia or a potential issue?
I see a little bit of both, and mind you, I might say the talent money for the whole year, 2,500 runs, was 100 quid, which we shared between one batsman and one bowler. And my contract for the year was 900, which Andrew probably wouldn't get out of bed for. No, but I do see it. I mean, there's a golden opportunity for players, and it's taken far too long to come. And I think the players have always been the central point of the game. I do feel a little bit about, Andrew says that they're going to protect the Test cricket, but the guys who are going to be playing now that are 6, 8 years, 10 years old, all they're going to focus in is 2020 cricket, and that does worry me to a little bit, to a degree. So I think it's up to administrators, it's up to people who love the game to make sure that the Test arena is protected. It's going to be a difficult one because...
But is it as simple as just profile? I mean, your suggestion is that the profile of Test cricket will be diminished by the impact of 2020.
That's my personal opinion. I think it will be. It has to be, because it's becoming a commercial operation, Mark. It's becoming... There's a lot of people involved in cricket now because of the commercial opportunities, not because they love the game. And I think there needs to be a balance between the two. If you don't have somebody that loves the game and it's just a commercial operation, then the tendency is that the things that we value about cricket and which the Archbishop has talked about will be lost in the commercial aspects of it. You've got to have a balance between the two.
Instinctively, I've read that you're in favour of the idea. You like the nature of the 2020 game, but this balance is kind of easier said than done.
We have to believe that we have something worth saving. I mean, Test cricket, county cricket, two-innings cricket, cricket that goes on a long time, where you develop the whole range of skills that we love about it. And we have to believe in that, and we have to hope that the people, families and children who go to see IPL played in India or go to see the 2020 played in this country in the next few weeks will, at least some of them, want to move on beyond 2020, because 2020 is fine and it is enjoyable and it's got more cricket in it than I thought it would have from what I've seen. I mean, in terms of proper strokes, wonderful timing of the ball, a range of bowling skills, fast and slow, brilliant fielding, these things that, and the Indian League has done some more things than that. For example, did you know that in every team that played in the Indian League, there had to be 4 players under 19, Indian players, which is quite a bold thing to do, actually. So they're trying to do things so that these young lads, schoolboys really, or a little more, will be playing with people like Shane Warne, Dhoni, McGrath, all of these people, and learning how to compete at cricket and play cricket. So they'll pick up things from them. So I hope it is a difficult thing, but I hope it'll work. We have to have some faith, actually.
Is there I mean, we obviously read things in the papers, but tell us the truth now. Is there a general consensus in the dressing room that it'd be great to get out to India and earn the next buck?
I'm not sure I'm high on the list of the IPL's priorities, so it's not something I'm losing sleep over. I think certain members of the England side feel that there might be opportunities there for them. But I'll just leave it at that, I think.
He's not having a go at the English either.
Yes. Beautifully Freudian. Let's move on. The Archbishop touched on a name that I think all of us have an enormous affection for. And he certainly gave me, as a young man, incredible pleasure. His bat was what inspired me to insist on owning a Duncan Fearnley bat. He had the black triangle. Basil d'Oliveira, who was writ large across our sky, really, for so many reasons, not least the reasons touched upon by the Archbishop. I have great memories of him. Michael, you must have equally fascinated memories.
Well, the memories are more, I think, certainly playing against him, enjoying his play and his batting and bowling and so on, and his dry, laconic humour. That's one thing. But I suppose the most important memories are of him as a symbol, an emblem. Oh, I remember one thing he said about that West Indies team that you mentioned, Archbishop, about 1963 with Wes Hall and Charlie Griffith. And Basil d'Oliveira said, "Nice bonking pace." That was the kind of batsman he was. Easy come, easy go. But he was as a symbol as well that he was so important.
You guys were incredibly strong. I mean, you had this raft of talent came out of South Africa in the early and middle 60s. Would you have had any idea of Basil's ability when you were growing up?
To a degree, yes, but generally no. And I think the Archbishop hit it on the head. That we know there was two separate societies, and when it came to a head, and we were on the back foot, and it wasn't going to happen. I was playing county cricket at the time. I basically knew it wasn't going to happen. But I think when you're young and naive, and you think, well, everybody will be able to sort this out. It'll only take a few years. We didn't realise it'd take 22 years.
No. But when Basil got here, and you saw him play here, first for Worcestershire, and then into the England side in the late 60s, I mean, did you go, wow, we had this guy playing in South Africa and none of us knew about it? This is an issue, this is a problem?
Yeah, there was. I mean, to a degree, as I say, but there were moves afoot at that time. I think there were a lot of people within South Africa, and certainly in the cricket, which was probably a more enlightened society than say, rugby, for example. So there were a few players like Tiffy Barnes and Edward Habani and people like that who came into double wicket competitions, and we sort of saw that there was a reasonable standard of cricket. But obviously there was no one as good as Basil was.
Have you seen any film of him?
I've seen some sort of highlights package and stuff like that. Looked like he was
powerful striker of the ball. My greatest memory is right here, funnily enough, not in an England match, in the Worcestershire Cup final, when he batted on one leg, and he left the field. He made 40 odd and left the field to a standing ovation at Lord's, having made 40, and it said a lot for the man's stature, I think, as well as his play. Barry, coming back to that subject, in 1970, you were part of the team that walked off the field in protest at Newlands with a changed attitude, and one that, although it's on a different subject, you think might well apply to Zimbabwe now.
Yeah, I did. I mean, 1970 was a situation where we realised as cricketers, I think, and that was when we had Graham and Peter Pollock, Mark Proctor. We had a very pretty good side. And we had to make a statement. It was a rest of the world game against the leading province of the time, and we decided that we would, have one ball, all put our gear down, go in the dressing room for 15 minutes, make the statement. We were due to go to an official function, which was cancelled for the night. So it was. So
you bowled one ball.
One ball
in a first-class match, or a match against the rest of the world.
First-class match. Rest of South Africa versus the champion province. all put our kit down, walked off the ground. We had a prepared statement which we gave to the press. We were off the field for 15 minutes and we went back onto the field, and that prepared statement was read out. And that was actually, it was January 1971. I'd just come back from Australia, and that was our first sort of, I suppose, an amateur go at saying, listen, we had to do the right thing.
So the implication there is that you were educated by playing abroad.
Absolutely.
And the things the Archbishop referred to about the human race allowed you to appreciate what you saw.
Well, Gary Sobers, who I now count as a great friend, Clive Lloyd, all these fellas were starting to play county cricket at the time. The rules were relaxed in 1968 when they allowed overseas players. So, obviously all these great players came to play, and I came to play for Hampshire. So, you had what the Archbishop had described of, you're learning about humanity. So, for me now, it was a moral issue then, and it's, to me, Zimbabwe is still a moral issue, whichever way you look at it. And I'm aboard. At the time, the MCC ran cricket around the world. There was no ICC, and they were naturally very anti-South Africa, and they put all these things in place. I think the ICC are erring. They are not doing anything, and it frustrates the hell out of me that Zimbabwe has not been brought to book, because I don't see any issues. I don't see a different issue. It's a moral issue, and what he's doing is just, everybody knows it's not right, and cricket can play a part in that, and it's not.
Is that something the players touch upon? Are you given a chance to take your own position readily?
I think that the two previous tours to Zimbabwe have been very difficult issues in which players have been, to a certain extent, left in the lurch by both the ECB and the government, I think. I think it has come down to a certain extent to personal preference, and there have been some tough decisions made in previous tours. And I think when we come round to the issue again, we all hope that the political situation in Zimbabwe will be very different then. But if it isn't, they're going to be very difficult decisions to be made.
But if, for example, if there was no change and we get to next May and Zimbabwe do land on these shores, do the players contemplate a position where they might not play?
It's something we're going to have to think about. We've certainly felt in the past that there have been great opportunities there for the government to show the strength of feeling within the country, and it's not just the cricket side of things. It's a great sense of feeling throughout the general population that our last tour to Zimbabwe shouldn't have gone ahead, and the government chose not to do that for whatever reason. And if it comes down to players individually having to do that, then we're definitely going to have to look at it.
Historically, the government has stood off.
Yes, I agree with what Barry said, that it's not right. And I remember a conversation I was fortunate enough to have with Alan Paton, who wrote Cry the Beloved Country in Pietermaritzburg, when I was a young hopeful on the last MCC tour of South Africa in 1964-65. And I was sort of saying wishy-washy things about what would be the consequences of this and the consequences of that. And Alan Paton said, there comes a time when something is just wrong, and you don't want to do it because it's wrong. And it seemed to me that was an early lesson in the limitations of utilitarian ethics, but also a lesson about South Africa, and I think the same applies now.
And can you, as president of the MCC, give a strong lead on that?
Well, the MCC has been trying to give its individual opinions, and the committee is going to discuss it again very soon. I hope that the MCC will give a strong lead. I'm saying what I think, personally. The MCC has to be a little bit careful, I think, as well, that we don't act as if we still are the lords of all that we survey, as we once sort of in cricketing terms were. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't have an opinion and voice it and say it as strongly as we can. And in some ways, of course, it's easier for us because we don't have to deal with the financial and political consequences as the ICC or the ECB have to do. I mean, it's much harder for them. So I think we can give a lead from our own point of view, and I hope we will.
One of the many excellent things that the MCC has undertaken in recent times is the formation of the World Cricket Committee under the guidance of Tony Lewis, and both Barry and Michael are on that committee. And something that's come out of it is the possibility, probability, and now it seems likelihood of a referral system for umpires. We have this ongoing issue. We've talked about it every year. For those of you that have been to every one of the 7 Cowdrey lectures, we've talked about this just about every time, I think, from different angles, admittedly, but the umpiring in the last 2 test matches has been so darn good that it's, you really have thought there's absolutely no need for any outside help at all. But there are still situations where the viewer has a better viewpoint, a view, than the umpire, and so you have gone down the referrals route, which incidentally allows, I think, 3 times for each team in each innings to question an umpire's decision and refer it to the third umpire. Is that correct?
Well, I think it's on trial, and there's always going to be a general difference of opinion, and some people are going to be in favour and some are not. But I think what they generally want to do is get the right decision for the players and for the paying public. I mean, Hawkeye, for example, is he's going to work it all out. It wasn't 100% before, and it's still not 100%, nor is an umpire for that matter. But generally speaking, umpires get it around 90% of the time. I think what they want to do is make sure that the viewer at home and the player feels comfortable that decision is the right one. And there's going to be circumstances where somebody might be playing for his place and gets a baddie. And you might want to say to yourself, well, that's part of cricket, but in the end, I think people would want the right decision to be made. So it's the jury's out. I don't say it'll end up that way. I think one of the things that Steve Wall made as a suggestion during one of the World Cricket Committee meetings, which I thought was a very good one, is the best umpires will umpire the games. And if you have to expand your number of umpires because there's a certain amount of travel, I can think of umpires who I won't name that are not umpiring at that elite level because they've chosen not to.
When you say the best will umpire, you mean that an Australian might umpire an Australian test match?
Simon Telfer might do England-Australia, and I think the players would be very comfortable with that because he's a very good umpire.
The players? Would they be?
Absolutely. I've got no problem with it personally. I think you mentioned Simon Telfer there. I think he is the best umpire in the world, and in an important game, you want the best umpire standing.
Breeze, I fear with referrals for justice for some, but not for all.
I think the idea about a referral is that if your request to have it referred is upheld, that doesn't count as one of the 3. So I don't think, I mean, the risk is that you wouldn't bother with a referral on behalf of a night watchman who you don't reckon can bat. But
smart.
you wouldn't waste too much of your precious referrals for him. But I think the important thing is everyone's got used to the camera for many decisions, and we're all very pleased to get decisions right, and I'd like to get as many decisions right as I can. And if you can use the cameras for more without taking up too much time, I'd like to do that. I don't know if referrals are the best way or not, but I would like to use the cameras when possible.
I'm with you. I think that just use the third umpire, even if it takes a moment. Use the third umpire if you have doubt. Duncan Fletcher, of whom you were a fan, and absolutely rightly so, I was too, was the man who really conceived this.
He was.
Going back a decade, he first mentioned it to me.
Yeah, he was, and he's been a bit advocate of it. I personally don't like it. That's my own personal view on it. I think it has the opportunity for players or for umpires to feel undermined by the players, which I think is a dangerous boundary to cross. Personally, I agree. I personally think that the way to go is the umpires have the ability to refer any decision they make if they're not completely comfortable with the decision, regardless of whether players are happy with it or not.
Or the third umpire can get in their ear and say, hang on, you might want to look at this again, or I'm going to just look at this again.
Yeah, absolutely. I just don't think the players should be involved in the decision-making process at all.
Right. Good call. We've got a couple more subjects I'd just like to touch on. Firstly, the South Africans arriving soon. England have done a job on New Zealand eventually. It took a while to get going, but in the end there was some fabulous cricket played, and to see James Anderson bowl that late outswing like that, I think that's one of the great things, really. the South Africans, for me, probably on paper, the best side since '94 to come here.
Very good side, lots of quality fast bowling, but I tell you what, if James Anderson bowls those swingers like that, Graham Smith's in a lot of trouble playing across the line. But no, it's a good side. They've got solid batting at the top, Neil McKenzie and Graham Smith, of course, Hashim Amla and Jacques Kallis, of course, who hasn't been a great success in IPL and will want to prove himself here. And then they've got a battery of a couple of young fast bowlers, and Morne Morkel and Dale Steyn, I think, is a real talent. Thin in the spinning department, so if you have weather like this for a month or so, Monty might be in his element, because our guys have never been traditionally very good players of spin. Getting better, because they've been to India a few times now, so they're getting better at playing spin. But it'll be an interesting series. I think it's a very well balanced two teams, and it could be a very good contest.
No, why are you shaking your head,
No, I
Mr.
thought you were
President?
going to ask me a question.
I was going to say to you, should England players turn up at Test match grounds and find something for Monty then, if South Africa are a bit dodgy in the spin department?
Well, I wouldn't put it quite so crudely. But I think any game of cricket is a better game if the ball turns as the game goes on, and that it brings more skills into the game. And certainly we shouldn't ignore the fact we've got Monty on our side.
Couldn't have put it better myself.
I put you on the spot a few times this evening, and you're about 98 not out. So in order to brush your way to 100, is there anything in the camp that might just suggest to a groundsman that, gosh, it looks to me as if we've got Monty and they haven't? Or do you just turn up and play on what you get?
I like what Mike said about it would be good to see wickets at turn as the game goes on. Hopefully it's quite early in the game, not right on day one. But I think, look...
what about the series, generally?
Yeah, I think we're really excited about it. And some of the cricket that's been played against New Zealand, they're a very disciplined bowling attack. They're not going to knock your head off, but they're very disciplined. I think with South Africa, we might see a lot more attacking cricket all round. They'll come at us hard. We'll probably have to up our tempo a little bit. And likewise, when we're bowling, I think that is a great recipe for a fantastic series. Two very evenly matched sides, two sides that are really looking up at the top of the tree, saying we want to be there, and are both going to be very motivated. And it's got the billing of an absolute cracker.
And is the on the field at the moment, at international level, is the spirit of the game in the right place? Is it in situ?
It seems that this series against New Zealand has been fantastic. The vast majority of all the Test matches I've played have been played in an excellent spirit. And
even in Australia?
I said the vast majority of the Test matches I've played. I think that there are times where Australia play the game very, very hard, and that's part of what makes them a great side. I think they do recognise generally that there's a boundary they shouldn't cross, but heat of the moment, sometimes maybe those lines get slightly frayed.
The frayed lines are quite interesting, because you played in incredibly tough domestic cricket. The Currie Cup was unbelievably tough, and you would argue probably tougher than a lot of the Test cricket that you watch today, particularly if it's between the weaker nations. But do you, in terms of your position as a guardian of the game and the big role you've had with the Players Association, the International Players Association, do you look upon cricket now in a judgmental way and feel it's in the right light, being played in the right light?
Yeah, I think, all cricketers will look back and say there's things they shouldn't have done, and if they had their time again, they wouldn't do them. But I think, generally speaking, all cricketers have got an idea of the value and the spirit of the game, and 99 times out of 100, they don't cross that line. And if they do, it stays on the field, or they have a drink, or they meet the guy afterwards, and they will apologise. I feel a little sorrier for the guys today, because obviously everything's under scrutiny. There's television cameras everywhere, and they can't move. And sometimes you need to let off a little bit of steam. People have a certain personality, and I think you've got to make a little bit of an allowance for that sort of thing. Over the top, no, but a bit of passion doesn't go astray with me.
And Michael, the idea of the spirit of cricket can be elusive and can mean very different things to different people in different parts of the world.
And to different people in the same parts of the world as well. It says in the little film we saw, it mentions tough, and no one's saying anything against toughness. And no one's saying anything. I think nobody should be saying anything against the fact that cricket is not only a physical game, it's a psychological game. If you set a field, you don't only set a field to put a player in the place where you think the ball's going to go, but you set a player to make the batsman think about what it is you want him to do or don't want him to do, or think he can't do. You know, like if you say within his hearing, or even without his hearing, you know, he doesn't need a man out there. He can't hit it there. Then you're nibbling at him a little bit in a way that seems to me to be perfectly legitimate. Some people wouldn't agree with that. That's what I think. So I think if it's done with some humour and with some respect, to come back to that word respect, then all sorts of things are possible and allowable. And there are lines that you just don't cross. But there isn't a completely clear line that you could draw.
No, and there are serial offenders too, perhaps, who could be isolated. It's worth, we've done this every year right at the end, and in fact Sunil Gavaskar did it for me at the start, but that word respect for opponents, for umpires, for yourself and for the game seemed to me to sum up exactly what we mean about the spirit of cricket that's been so well captured this evening by the Archbishop, who also mentioned Monty Panesar's celebrations. And I have to say, I watched some footage the other day of Richie Benaud in '61 here, winning the match at Old Trafford when he came around the wicket and bowled his leg breaks into the rough. He actually has told me that he was so wary of doing that, it was so unusual and almost unethical, that he took two senior players aside, Neil Harvey and maybe Ray Lindwell, I don't exactly remember, at tea, and said, listen, this is what I'm thinking of doing, how do you think it'll go down? And they said, go for it, mate, if we want to get the Poms. And he did, and he won the game. But what interested me about Richie was his celebrations, with that open shirt, the gold chain going, and the little skip and the high fives. And of course that's gone through, as you mentioned, to the way that the West Indians so joyously celebrate the game, and the sedate nature of a wicket celebration has certainly gone with Monty, who takes it to an entirely different level, and I think honestly makes us smile every time we see it, even if at times we might think, oh, it's a fraction over the top there with that appeal. The fact is that that man allows us to celebrate the game of cricket, which in the end is why we're here. So enormous thank yous to Mike Brearley, to Barry Richards, to Andrew Strauss, to the MCC for again putting on what I think we can now say has grown into a spectacular, and to the Archbishop for gracing us tonight. It's a heck of a fall ball, sir, but you've been the captain of it. Thank you very much.